a recent 2001 graduate from Harvard University, and currently an assistant professor at the University of Rhode Island. Professor La Luna is an expert on a very unique figure in Italian literature, an Italo-Albanese writer by the name of Girolamo di Rada, a 19th century, early 20th century writer. And I think you must be one of the few in this country who bring this expertise.
Well, there was another professor from Washington, Georgetown, he died a few years ago.
Ah, so now, fortunately we have you. And your thesis, your dissertation was on
I also published a book already.
I see.
And I'm writing a new one. Yeah.
That's very nice. And Professor Michelangelo La Luna will be our guide for the third canto of Purgatorio. And we thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy and honored to be here tonight, and also to see so many people that
miserable weather.
Actually look very Dante involved. They have the books. They look like they know what I'm going to talk about. So I'm sure most of you have been here also last month. So that's also very important to know. I would like to thank your department, as Professor Mormano from Pascal Notia, but thanks also to them. I would like also to thank the presence of my maestra from Harvard, Elvira Di Fabio, and thanks to the students and to all the audience for coming. They told me that it's better to read at the end. The word lectura in the Middle Ages means to read and then to discuss with the students what the maestro was reading, but we are going to do it vice versa. I'm going to discuss about the canto and then read at the end. Today it's a special day, it's the Monday after Easter, and for one day we are missing the time because Dante arrived in Purgatorio on the Sunday, on Easter day in the morning. So just for a day. And also if you count the trip ab Incarnatio from the conception of Christ, which is usually on March 25th, 9 months before Christmas. That's another tradition. No? They say that Dante either started on March 25th or on April the 8th of the 1300. So even if we count from March 25th, we are missing for one day the day of Purgatorio 3rd. But this is an important day. On March 28th was born Raffaello Sanzio, a very famous painter. And Canto 3rd, it's a little bit different from other cantos. First of all, because it's not like a painting with its own frame. In order to understand it, we have to go a little bit back to Canto 2nd. And in Canto 2nd, at the end, as you know, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you, Dante, Virgil, and other souls that just arrived on the shore of the mountain island of Purgatory are escaping because they were listening to this beautiful song sang by Casella, Amor che nella mente mi ragiona, a song taken from Dante's Convivio, although Professor Pertile, one of my maestros from Harvard, says it's not true because nobody knew Convivio at that time, so we cannot really think that that song means what Dante wants to show us in the Convivio. But anyway, forget about the meaning of the song. Let's just say that Dante and Virgil with the other soul are escaping because instead of paying attention to their duties and climbing the mountain of Purgatory in order to cleanse themselves, these souls were just listening to this beautiful song, forgetting everything else. And in Canto 3rd, as you can see at the beginning, in the first 3 lines, Dante and Virgil are escaping avegna che la subitanea fuga dispergesse color per la campagna, rivolti al monte ove ragione fruga, eccetera, eccetera, io mi restrinsi alla fida compagna. If you think about it, Dante is not a soul that belongs to Purgatorio, he's like us, his own body is not a spirit yet. Virgil neither, because he comes from limbo, from hell. So Cato's rebuke was not toward them, but was toward the other souls. Even so, both Dante and Virgil feel bad, because for a moment they also forgot what was their duty. Dante forgot that he had to go up to meet Beatrice at the top of the mountain of Purgatorio, and Virgil forgot that he was the guide of Dante, that he has to pay attention to his pupil, he has to drive him up and then leave him with the statues before Beatrice comes. So Virgil feels very bad, and Dante himself feels very bad. And here we have some a philosophical language that Dante uses. He says that his mind was too focused in one intensio. This word intensio is the same as the same root of intellect, of intelligence, and means the mind that is focused in one thing, in one or more things, whereas the word reason is used in a philosophical way to think about something wider. So Dante and Virgil were too focused with everybody else, and they forgot the big picture, let's call it, which was this big mountain that once again comes to their eyes as soon as Dante forgets for a moment the song and thinks of his duty. But Dante here is also playing a very interesting thing, because as soon as he is assured by Virgil that that's okay, it wasn't so bad now, let's continue this trip, what we see is that he's afraid of his own shadow. I mean, we have Dante escaping, Dante that says, well, finally I can look up again and see what I have to do, and then he's afraid of his own shadow. It's nothing new for him, because in his life, I'm sure everybody, even tonight here, maybe there is no shadow, but everybody knows his own shadow. He's afraid because he's the only shadow, and he's afraid to remain by himself, to be abandoned by Virgil. And this is a big problem, because once again Dante focuses in one thing, in one object. Again, we have another loss of reason. I try to give an interpretation to this two moments in which Dante loses his concentration, his mind, his reason, whatever you want to call it, his mission. I think that here Dante, first of all, wants to point out the fact that Virgil, as a figure of guide dash reason, you know that Virgil represents reason toward the Divine Comedy, he doesn't have the power to do and to be the guide or the excellent guide that he has been through hell. If you remember, Virgil has visited hell before he went down with Dante, thanks to this Maga Editophene, if I remember well her name, before. Plus he had written the Aeneid, where he speaks about Aeneas going into hell, meeting his father, and knowing about the future of Rome and the Roman Empire. So he has a knowledge of hell, but he doesn't know anything about Purgatorio. And if you remember another very important episode of the Divine Comedy, in Canto 26 of Inferno, Ulysses who is this pagan figure that in a way represents the reason, the willing of knowing that everybody has, the knowledge also itself. He gets also lost. He reaches the mountain of Purgatorio, but he doesn't have the divine grace that can save him. So he dies with all the people of his body. So Virgil, of course, now is like another Ulysses, and he starts to feel his weakness here. And you can see that also in Canto 4, you can see that also in Canto 6, of Purgatorio, and so on, up to Canto 19, etc., where he meets Statues, this other fellow poet. Now Statue tells to Virgil, you are like one person that takes his lamp here instead of here, no? And people that stand behind you are enlightened by you, but you don't see where you are going. Because Virgil, although he was considered a prophet in the Middle Ages, because he sort of spoke about Christ, they thought, but he wasn't speaking about Christ, he was not saved. I mean, he's in hell. Now, if you another reason why I think Dante is doing this introduction with all these doubts is because later on he's going to talk about a very important theological point, which is the following. Somebody that is excommunicated by the church can be saved or not. Maybe he wants to prepare ourselves also to that episode, but we will talk about it at the end of the Canto with Manfredi. So Virgil tries to tell to Dante, don't worry, I'm not going to abandon you now. You don't see my shadow because I am a spirit, like all the other spirits. And here, as a new thing that, I don't know if you have spoken before about this, but maybe I can mention, of Purgatorio we can see at least two things. First of all, the sun. We are outside. We are more or less not here in the south of America. That's where Dante thought, parallel to Jerusalem, maybe it would be more the south of America, Florida, something like that, no? So there is the sun, and this sun projects the shadow of Dante. And then finally here we have a kind of explanation of how the spirits are made, a little explanation. Then later on Dante will talk about it more. And Virgil says, if I don't have any shadow, or other souls don't project any shadow, you don't have to worry and you don't have to ask why. Siate contenti alquia, be just happy about what you know, without asking why all the time. Because if you want to know everything, if you want to discover all the whys, then faith, Jesus, the incarnation, it's not important. But if Jesus came, if Maria parturì, if she gave birth to Jesus, it's because we cannot know everything. And if we were able to know everything, Virgil says, I'm sure that other people before us, especially Plato and Aristotle, great philosophers, they could discover this last thing, the origin of everything. They could have saved themselves also, but they couldn't. They are in hell, together with Virgil in Limbo, Canto 4 of Inferno. So, as you can see, Virgil, by teaching Dante what to think, what to do, at the same time he's teaching himself. It's like criticizing himself because he belongs to this place where great philosopher of both the classic but also the Middle Ages are, I don't know if I should use the word, but punished, let's say. The only thing that they are suffering in this special place called limbo is that they always desire to know what God was, but they couldn't just because they were born before Christ. And sometimes also after Christ. Sometimes there are also figures like Averroes, Avicenna, the philosophers that translated, especially Aristotle, from Greek into Latin. They were not from Spain, originally from the Arabic countries. And so these people, all these philosophers, didn't have the grace from God, so they got lost in a way. And only thanks to the grace we can actually reach not just paradise, but also earthly paradise. This is important. You have to think that at the top of this mountain, Beatrice is waiting, Dante at the earthly paradise, where Adam indeed ate from the tree of the knowledge. So that's a very important thing, because what Dante wants to do, basically, is to teach and to show us how we can be happy. And there are two ways. One is by being happy in this earth, in this land, in this world. Another one is to go back to our roots, where we were with Adam and Eve, the earthly paradise. And then, of course, there is the happiness of paradise itself. And to reach the top of the mountain of Purgatorio, Dante doesn't need reason anymore so much. He needs more grace, and from Canto 17 on, he discovers it, that he needs a lot of will, free will especially, free will. Well, after Virgil speaks to Dante, he feels a little bit sad, because he cannot help too much, and because he is in limbo. And he's looking down, like thinking what we should do next, because he has never been there, neither has Dante. And while he's looking down, Dante is looking up. That's something strange, like Elvira was pointing to me before, no? The maestro looks down and the pupil looks up. And this means something, means that he learned better, or he knows more than Virgil at that point, what to do. And actually it's Dante that finally sees some people that are walking, that are coming. They look far, and they go very slowly, they walk very slowly. And so he says, Maestro, maybe those people there can help us. Look, don't look at them. Maybe we should go and talk to them. And then Virgil says, yes, you're right, my son. He calls him son, dolce figlio. Let's go and talk to these people. Who are these people? Where are we? We are in anti-purgatorio. We are not in purgatorio itself. Like limbo, it's before hell, it's in anti-inferno. And in this anti-purgatorio, there are souls that have to stay there for one reason or for the other. They are the negligence, and you will talk about those in 1 month, I think, with the student David, Belacqua, etc. And there are these souls that Dante and Virgil meet now, that are the excommunicates, the people that the church didn't like for one reason, because they consider them heretics or not believer, or because they did something bad to the church, and that repented at the last minute of their life usually, and so God saved them, although the church thinks that they are in heaven. Now, we don't have to criticize with this the church, because the church, with Fra Giordano da Pisa, for instance, admits this possibility. Fra Giordano says, you know, the church can tell that somebody is an heretic, whatever, but we don't really know what God will judge, and God can always forgive, and as Dante says, his eternal arms can embrace everybody that even at the last minute repents and understands, of course, the mistakes that he or she made. And so those souls have to stay here in this terrace of Purgatorio and Anti-Purgatorio 30 times the time they spend in life being excommunicated. So if a person was excommunicated for 1 year, let's say you, just I don't want to hang the court. He had to stay 30 years. 2 years excommunicated, 60 years he has to go around the mountain of Purgatory before he can go up and cleanse himself. So when these souls see Dante and Virgil, they are intimidated and not really afraid, but almost, you know, like they are seeing a miracle, something astonished for them, because again, Dante is alive and this shadow goes very far. And so these people go and stay very close to the rock. And Dante says that they are like sheep. That you know, they follow each other. What the first sheep does, the other one does, almost unconsciously, without thinking why. If one sheep walks, and all the rest go back after the first one. And it's a very nice and interesting thing that we read it later, as we said before. And so Virgil says to them, don't worry if you see this person. Can we cross the door, please? If you see this person that is here walking, he's alive, he's really alive, but he's alive and he's here thanks to the divine grace. So he, of course, is a special person. Dante is a special guest of hell, purgatory, and paradise, but thanks to the divine grace. So don't worry, and please, can you tell us how to climb the mountain, how to go up, because we are lost, and because this mountain is really difficult to climb. Dante uses this simile. He says, come tra Levici e Turbia, like the mountains in the La Spezia area in Liguria, or Turbia in the south of France, where the mountains are so high and very difficult to climb, but say even worse than that, it's the mountain of Purgatorio. The souls reply, yeah, go back, and over there you will find this way to go up, this path to go up. And one of the souls stops and asks Dante, do you recognize me? Dante looks at him and he says, no, I never saw you, I don't think so. And then he says, io sono Manfredi, I am Manfred, and my eyebrow is broken by a sword stroke, and then he shows his chest that has a wound. Just from these details we understand that this guy was killed somehow or was in a battle. Biondo era bello e di gentile aspetto. That's how Dante defines this figure. It's almost like defining David in the Bible. Beautiful, blonde, and with a gentle, noble aspect. And it's almost like defining him as a Christ also at the same time. Figura Christi, for sure, because the wound on the chest here is really clear. Manfred was a very important king. He was the son of Frederick II, who died in 1250. And he was an illegitimate son that took the power right after Frederick died. Although there was his brother Corrado IV, and there was then Corradino, nephew of Frederick II, that was actually going to be in charge of everything. But Manfred was so smart and so able politically that he was able to take the kingdom in 1258, 8 years after the death of Frederick II, and he kept it until he died on February 26 of 1266, so for 8 years. Like Frederick II, considered stupor mundi, they call him, lo stupore del mondo, the wonder of the world, this very important emperor. Dante speaks very well about these two figures from the Hohenstaufen family that ruled the kingdom of Naples especially, but they had of course also the power in Germany, and Frederick was also the emperor, was considered the emperor at the time. And Dante speaks very well in the Vulgari Eloquentia, where he considers them, of course, I would say almost genius, because you know Frederick II was a philosopher, he was a writer, he wrote also this treatise on how to hunt with the falcon, very important. He had a lot of poets. The first Italian poets were in Palermo, not in Florence, as we always think, not Firenze. No, the Poesia was born in Sicily, not in Tuscany. And then they were able to translate. Manfred was able to read and translate from Hebrew, for instance. They had a luxury life. Manfred was dressing always like you, like St. Patrick in green. That was considered something very... But they were also at the head of the Ghibelline party. This Ghibelline party was the party enemy to Dante's party, that was the Guelph. And the Ghibelline party was ruled by the emperor, Frederick II, and then later Manfred, and the Guelphs were ruled by the Pope, by the Church. So, in the Guelph environment, let's call it this way, they thought always that Frederick and Manfred at the end didn't really believe in God, that they were so sure of the intellectual conclusion, let's call them, that they didn't believe in God. But maybe it was only a political thing at the end, because Pope and state, or these emperors, at least they were enemies. So Dante follows this tradition, and he thinks, he heard Villani, other writers of the times write about this, that although these two kings, one is also an emperor, were so important, so famous, they probably were heretics. They didn't believe in God. And anyway, we know for sure that both Frederick II and Manfred were excommunicated. This is history. Where is Frederick II for Dante? I don't know, do you remember?
Somewhere in the Inferno.
In Inferno, right. Is among the Epicurean, Canto 10 of Inferno. Dante just mentioned his name, but he doesn't really talk to him. There is Farinata, Cavalcanti that cover all the Canto there. So actually, I'm not sure if he mentioned the name in Canto 11, but anyway, it's in the city of this Dite, among the Epicurean. Today, where is Frederick II? In the church, in the cathedral of Palermo. So he was excommunicated, remember, this is true, but today we find it in the church. So this means that also the judgment of the church sometimes can change. And Dante took this, I don't know how to call it, maybe legend or idea or opinion, that Manfred, at the end of his life, repented. That's one of those misteri della fede, mystery of faith. We don't know. He accepted this opinion, and he saves Manfred. This is also very important because, once again, Dante is although he doesn't like then later on Boniface VIII, the Pope, etc., and of course he puts most of the popes in hell, as you know, no? Canto 19. But Manfred is an enemy, and although he's an enemy, big enemy of his family, of Florence, of his party, Manfred is in purgatory. So I think we have to understand and think about this, because it shows us how Dante sometimes, has a really big vision and doesn't really want to punish. Maybe if we were going to write something, we would put Berlusconi or the enemies in hell, but Dante didn't do that. Dante was a little bit more flexible, at least, in this sense. So Manfred tells a little bit his story. And first of all, he's a king, bello, di gentile aspetto, so he presents himself very nicely. And then he tells that when he was defeated in Benevento by Charles of Anjou, this king called by Boniface VIII, by Clement IV, by Clement IV, to fight against him, this king from France. After he was defeated and he was killed by French, the French made a kind of grave for him on the head front of the bridge of Benevento. And in honor to honor a king, because of course Manfred was a king, all the soldiers throw a stone on the grave. So there was this big grave with stones where at least his body could be ensured there, could be safe. But what happened? The Pope Clement IV sends to Benevento my Calabrese, I am from Calabria, Archbishop of Cosenza, Bartolomeo Pignatelli, and the Archbishop has this duty. He has to take out the body of Manfred, because Benevento is part of the church, of the reign of the church. and he has to put him in a non-consecrated ground, in a non-consecrated land. So, further down to the river that was called in the Middle Ages Verde, that now is called Liri, and at the end Garigliano. Liri and Garigliano, it's the same river. When it arrives on the Tyrrhenian Sea, it's called Garigliano before Liri. So that's what this Pignatelli, the Archbishop, does. He takes the body and he brings it to this river, and now Manfred says, my bones are al vento e all'acqua, are lost. There is no grave anymore, and we don't know where they are. He uses the same words that Palinuro uses for himself when talks to Aeneas in the Aeneid Canto 4. And this contrast that we have is very important, because he presents himself as a king because he was a king, but at the same time he's not so proud, he's humble, and he thinks that his body is lost. That's a very important context to understand. And then he asked Dante to tell to the daughter, her name was Costanza, to pray for him. And this is a very important point, very, very important. Why Costanza, the daughter, has to pray for him? Because if she prays, he can go up faster. He doesn't have to wait those 30 years that we were talking about in the beginning. He can go up, I don't know when, but the more you pray, the more the souls of Purgatorio can go up the terraces and eventually to paradise. And why is this point very important? I don't know if you are tired or if I can continue. Can I go on? Because we are at the end, then we just have to read. Because Purgatorio didn't exist before the 11th century. I mean, we don't have a space where we say that's Purgatorio. There are no really documents that say that. And the whole concept of Purgatorio is born from this idea of us, people alive, that can pray for those souls that are neither in heaven nor in hell. And the first that talked about Purgatorio was Pietro Lombardo, maestro at the University of Paris, and then Bishop of Paris in 1159, then only for 1-2 years, in the 1160 he died. And in the 4 books called Sentenzie or Liber Sententiarum, Pietro Lombardo takes the authority of Augustine and Gregory the Great, Gregorio Magno, that have spoken about the possibility of souls that were sinners, but didn't, that in life were also correct people that follow always justice, etc. Maybe we all feel a little bit like that. We are sinners, but maybe we are nice people, good people, in other words. For those people, there was the possibility to be saved. St. Augustine was speaking of the souls like hidden, he says, in a ricettacolo, in a kind of container that keeps us away, far from what we really will be until the parousia comes, until Christ comes back and we go out and take our bodies from the graves where they are, and then we are a real essere of made of spirit and of what this bodiless body, I don't know how to call it, is, because it's bones, but it will be something else. That's what the Apocalypse says. So that's what St. Augustine says. We are in this kind of container, ricettacolo, and there are people that are in hell, and we can pray even for those people that are in hell. What does that do to them? Does the prayer help them? No, but it helps us. That's very important. This is a concept that later was taken by Ugo Foscolo nei Sepolcri, in Sepolcri, no? And that the prayer usually, or the tomb, because speaking about the graves, can help us, not just them. It doesn't help them. Foscolo didn't believe in God and the soul, so that's why. But can help the people here. For those in paradise, a prayer can be very important because it doesn't help them, but it helps us because they can give graces to us. We can receive a grace from a soul that is in paradise. And then from those that are in purgatory, in this middle section, let's call it, they can get better, or they can have less punishment. This is what St. Augustine says. But there is no place. The only words that we read in Latin are in igno purgatorio, in the fire of purgatory. That's it. Purgatorio here is an adjective, it's not a noun. It's only later on we have the noun, the word purgatorium, that comes out, and it's used in the second half of the 12th century, in 1170, 1180, at least in three writers. And then we have later on this very important essay by Enrico de Saltrei, it's called Enrico or Henrik de Saltrei, that speaks about the Purgatorium of St. Patrick. Of St. Patrick from Ireland. There is a legend that says that when St. Patrick, you know St. Patrick better than me, so I don't have to talk about I'm Italian. When St. Patrick was Christianizing Ireland, Jesus pointed him a place, a cave, where people could go, stay at least one day, one night, and see the afterworld, have images, visions, that we want to call them, and make this trip, imaginary trip, and see heaven, hell, and purgatory. So this is the first time that we actually see a purgatorio as a place. As a place, because St. Patrick Cave was a kind of indication of a real place where then he thought to build the church and to give the key of the church and of the cave to an abbey that was giving the opportunity to people to see this place, this cave, and everything in it after a rite that they had to accomplish. And there was this chevalier called Owain that went there, and he spent, I think, 3 nights when he could see everything, and he could see one important thing that maybe almost for sure has also influenced Dante. He could see that the souls of these Purgatorio, this place in the middle, could get better, could go up. By going up, I don't know if you read all the Purgatorio, Dante has 7 P's here. P, peccatum, peccato, no? See? When he goes up, each terrace, 1 P goes away, and it feels like lighter, let's call it, let's say, no? Purified. So this idea of having sections and the concept of purification, the concept also of time, are present in the Divine Comedy and in Purgatorio only. Time doesn't exist in hell, it doesn't exist in paradise, but it exists in Purgatorio. And probably Enrico de Saltrey and this legend that he talks about of Saint Patrick has had an influence on Dante's Purgatorio. If you want to know more about Purgatorio, the birth of Purgatorio, there is this book written by a French historian, Jacques Le Goff, L-E, capital G-O-F-F, La nascita del Purgatorio, La naissance du Purgatorio, the birth of Purgatorio. I don't know if it's translated. In Italian it's translated for sure. Paris, Gallimard, G-A-L-L-I-M-A-R-D, 1981. And over there you can find all the information. Okay, so now I'm going to read the Canto, and then I will be happy to answer to any questions that you may have. In the meanwhile, if somebody has to leave, maybe it's better if he or she leaves now, because so we don't interrupt them. I have also the book, if you like, because I'm using the Italian. Anybody who wants the book? No? You have Sapeni. Avegna che la subitanea fuga dispergesse color per la campagna, rivolti al monte ove ragione fruga, chi mi restrinsi alla fila compagna. E come sarei io senza lui corso, chi m'avria attratto su per la montagna? El mi parea da se stesso rimorso, oh dignitosa coscienza e netta, come te di ciò fallo amaro morso. Quando i piedi suoi lasciar la fretta, che l'onestade ad ogni atto dismaga, la mente mia, che prima era ristretta, l'ontento rallargò sì come vaga, e diedi il viso mio incontro al poggio, che verso il ciel più alto si dislaga. Lo sol, che dietro fiammeggiava roggio, rotto n'era dinanzi alla figura, che avea in me dei suoi raggi l'appoggio. Io mi volsi da lato con paura d'essere abbandonato, quando io vidi solo dinanzi a me la terra oscura. E il mio conforto, perché pur diffidi? A dirmi cominciò tutto rivolto. Non credi tu, meteco, e ch'io ti guidi? Vespero è già colà dove è sepolto lo corpo dentro al quale io facea ombra. Napoli là, ed a Brandizio è tolto. Ora, se innanzi a me nulla s'ombra, non ti maravigliar più che di cieli che l'uno all'altro raggio non incombra. A sofferir tormenti caldi e geli, simili corpi la virtù dispone, che, come fa, non vuol che a noi si svegli. Matto e chi spera che nostra ragione possa trascorrere la infinita via che tiene una sustanza in 3 persone. State contenti, umana gente alquia, che se possuto aveste veder tutto, mestier non era parturir Maria, e disiar vedeste senza frutto, tai che sarebbe lor visio quetato, che eternalmente dato lor per lutto. Io dico d'Aristotile e di Plato e di molt'altri. E qui chinò la fronte e più non disse, e rimase turbato. Noi divenimmo intanto al piede del monte. Quivi trovammo la roccia sì etta che indarno vi sarien le gambe pronte. Tra l'erice e turbia, la più diserta, la più rotta ruina è una scala verso di quella, agevole e aperta. Or chissà da qual man la costa cala, disse il maestro mio fermando il passo, sì che possa salir chi va senz'ala. Mentre che tenendo il viso basso esaminava del cammin la mente e io mirava suso intorno al sasso, da man sinistra m'apparì una gente d'anime che moviano i piedi per noi e non pareva si venia lente. Leva, dissi io, maestro, gli occhi tuoi, ecco di qua chi ne darà consiglio se tu da te medesimo aver non puoi. Guardò allora e con libero piglio rispose: andiamo in là, che vegna un piano, e tu ferma la spene, dolce figlio. Ancora era quel popolo di lontano, dico, dopo i nostri 1000 passi, quando un buon citatore trarria con mano, quando si strinser tutti ai duri massi dell'alta riva, e steter fermi e stretti come a guardar chi va dubbiando stassi. O ben finiti, o già spiriti eletti, Virgilio incominciò, per quella pace che io credo che per voi tutti s'aspetti, ditene dove la montagna giace, sì che possibile sia l'andare in suso, che perder tempo a chi più sa più spiace. Come le pecorelle escono del chiuso a una, a 2, a 3, e l'altre stanno timidette atterrando l'occhio e l'uso, a ciò che fa la prima e l'altre fanno, adosandosi a lei, se ella s'arrestra, semplici e quete, e lo in perché non sanno, sì vi Dio muove a venir la testa di quella mandra fortunata lotta, pudica in faccia e nell'andare onesta. Come color dinanzi vide rotta la luce interna dal mio destro canto, sì che l'ombra era da me alla grotta, restaro e trasser sé indietro alquanto, e tutti gli altri che venieno appresso, non sappiendo il perché, fenno altrettanto. Senza vostra domanda, io vi confesso che questo è corpo uman che voi vedete, perché il lume del sole in terra è fesso. Non vi maravigliate, ma credete che non senza virtù che dal ciel vegna cerchi di soverchiar questa parete. Così il maestro e quella gente degna: tornate, disse, entrate innanzi dunque, coi dossi della man facendo insegna. E un di loro incominciò: chiunque tu sei, così andando, volgi il viso, pon mente se di là mi vedesti chiunque. Io mi volsi per lui e guardai il fiso, biondo era bello e di gentile aspetto, ma l'un dei cigli un corpo avea diviso. quand'i mi fui umilmente disdetto d'averlo visto mai, el disse, or vedi, e mostrommi una piaga a sommo il petto. Poi sorridendo disse, io sono Manfredi, nepote di Costanza imperatrice, ond'io ti priego che, quando tu riedi, vadi a mia bella figlia, genitrice dell'onor di Sicilia ed Aragona, e dichi il vero a lei, s'altro si dice. Poscia ch'io ebbi rotta la persona di due punte mortali, io mi rendei, piangendo, a quei che volentier perdona. Orribili furono li peccati miei, ma la bontà infinita ha sì gran braccia che prende ciò che si rivolge a lei. Se il pastor di Cosenza, che alla caccia di me fu messo per clemente, allora avesse il Dio belletta questa faccia, l'ossa del corpo mio sariano ancora in co del ponte presso a Benevento, sotto la guardia della grave mora. Or le bagna la pioggia e muove il vento, di fuor dal regno, quasi lungo il verde, dove le trasmutò a lume spento. Per lor maledizion sì non si perde, che non possa tornar l'eterno amore, mente che la speranza a fior del verde. Vero è che quale in contumace amore di Santa Chiesa, ancor che al fin si penta, stargli convien da questa ripa in fore, per ognuno tempo che egli è stato, 30, in sua presunzione, se tal decreto più corto per buon piedi non diventa. Vedi oggimai se tu mi puoi far lieto, revelando alla mia buona Costanza, come mai visto, e anco esto di lieto, che qui per quei di là molto s'avanza. Thank you. Thank you to Dante also. Masterpiece.
I never fully understood the position, the political position of Dante in being a guelfo, ma era guelfo bianco, quindi non era contrario all'imperatore completamente, perché erano i guelfi neri che erano esclusivamente per il Papa e contro l'imperatore. Do I have to talk English?
No. But you have to answer in English.
So, what's...
Well, first of all, there are two parties. One is for the Pope, based as an idea, I mean, to have an idea, which are the Guelphs, and one, the Ghibellina for the emperor. The situation became a little bit critical and different after the death of Manfred, and after that the Ghibelline party disappeared basically after 1266. And because without a leader, the Ghibelline didn't really have a point of reference. That was the main problem. So in the Guelph party, then we have the whites and the black. Usually they were also connected through families. It's not just a political thing, it's also marriages, families, things that are very important in the Middle Ages. And Dante, of course, hates the Pope because Boniface VIII was the one that sent him in exile, indirectly, but that's what is the real history, and he knows that, of course. And at the same time, we don't have to forget that Dante in the Monarchia, in this book, speaks very well about the figure of the emperor, because it says that for this world where we are now, we need the guidance of the emperor in order to be happy. And happiness was always like everybody here, I think, no? Everybody else. We want to be happy, and the emperor was the one that was going to grant this to the world. And the Pope should only be a spiritual figure that has to take care only of the souls and of what our life and our happiness would be in heaven, in the afterworld. So Dante likes the emperor. He hopes that Arrigo VII, Enrico, you say, the seventh, would come down from Germany and be the new emperor and reestablish the Roman and Sacred Roman Empire again, not like Carlo Magno did in the year 800. But this doesn't happen, and I love Dante. I studied Dante a lot in my life. I really love Dante, but we don't want to say it, but we have to criticize a little bit his vision, because I personally think that he didn't understand that at that time in Europe, the cities and the little states were going to become more and more important, and so this figure of the emperor was a little bit obsolete, was not going to work anymore. People didn't want to belong to this big union. Today we have the European Union, and sometimes there were other problems in the Middle Ages, because the emperor wanted, in order to control, or the king, let's say, speak the king, before an emperor becomes an emperor, he's a king at least, no? They want to control the land that they have, and usually the people that were able to do that were also bishops, or at least people that were able to write and to read, and so usually from the church. So there was this conflict: who is going to appoint them, the emperor or the pope? And there was this big war of the investitures, the investitura, and sometimes what happened is this, that if, for instance, the Pope said, I have to appoint, and not you, the people, the lords of your land, then what happened many times, we saw this many times in the Middle Ages, the emperor saw these people that he had going against him, going with the Pope. So it's a difficult moment. Dante, of course, is not able to fully understand. He also didn't live too long enough to really see more about the end of the Middle Ages. And you have also to consider the fact that he was always in exile. But his vision is at the same time great, and it's important especially because he tells to the church that the church has to be the church, doesn't have to be church and emperor state at the same time, because the power of the church was unbelievable.
I wonder if you can help me a little bit with understanding the choreography of this concept. I don't understand why the souls are walking so slowly. Then Dante and Virgil walk toward them, essentially saying, we're lost, we're confused, can you help us? And then they say, well, walk on ahead of us. So it's almost the blind leading the blind. And then as they walk on ahead of the other souls, the soul in the vanguard, Manfred, says, walk ahead but turn behind and look at me. I don't get it. Who is who is leading and why are they going so slowly?
Why, we don't know. It's not explained. Maybe they have time to spend there, I don't know. Or maybe they are tired, they have to stay. They have plenty of time. They have, in a way, it's a kind of punishment that they have to experience, undergo. I don't know. And it's part of the punishment. Before you go up, you have to go around the terrace, the anti-Purgatorio terrace, for at least 30 times the time you were excommunicated. There is not really an explanation. We have also the sorts of that are negligent, and maybe they go slow because they are negligent. They Belacqua in Canto 4, no, says to Dante, where are you going? There is no rush. No. Sedendo, mirando, I know things. By sitting and thinking, looking with my mind, I become wise. That's what Belacqua says. So go slow. Where you have to hurry up, where you want to go. So they were also lazy. But there is no other explanation. We don't know. And there is no. Of course, maybe we can answer in another way that until a soul, a spirit is free, doesn't have also that urge to go up, because later on you see other souls that actually go up, like statues, for instance, not that becomes the guide after Virgil that brings Dante to Beatrice. So in that case, you see that he's really happy to go. He's really, and then another thing, although these spirits are bodiless, as we can say with Dante, and with the translator also here, in a way they have a certain weight, which is not a physical one maybe, but it's a weight made by sins, by vices more than sins. Remember one big distinction between St. Augustine, Alberto Magno, Pietro Lombardo, and all the people that spoke about Purgatorio before. Dante doesn't put in Purgatorio people that have sins. There's no sin in Purgatorio. We think that it's sin, but it's not really sin. It's a vice, an habit, a tendency to sin, but it's not sin. This is a difference, big difference. And in a way, this was also said before, that with our prayers we cannot save somebody that really has sin. And we cannot change the destiny, in other words. We can only have a soul that is already saved, but that has to cleanse itself.
If I could, I want to say something about Manfredi,
Pray.
who refers to himself as the grandson of the empress,
Yeah.
not the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And why the empress?
Because he's an illegitimate son.
Yes, but
So she's still the grandmother.
that's so. But he's still the grandfather. He's not the illegitimate son of the emperor. He's the grandson of the emperor. So
And maybe because she's also in paradise.
but maybe because her mother was named Beatrice,
Beatrice, yeah. Yeah, maybe.
like the mother,
Yeah.
like the mother of his daughter. He names two women. His ancestor, his descendants. If both of these women have mothers who have the same name. His name happens to be Beatrice. I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe, yes. And it's interesting also that the daughter is called Costanza.
Yes.
So he mentioned twice the same name, Costanza, the grandmother.
The name not mentioned is, but it shows up in the same narration in both of them.
Yeah, that's a good
Maybe
point.
especially later.
He had something about it.
Yeah. There was another hand somewhere.
This is not for this particular
Yeah.
canto, but we're still at the beginning of Purgatory,
Mhm.
still thinking about 1 and 2. I'm interested in your take on why Cato,
Mhm.
the suicide and the pagan, would be not only in Purgatory, but so important to Purgatory.
Cato. Well, Cato killed himself, as you know, in Utica. What is said is that Cato, although he's a suicider, was killed himself for a very important idea, which is freedom, libertà va cercando, che si cara come chi vita, something like that, distrugge. So he was looking for freedom, and he killed himself because he didn't want to become a slave of Caesar. And so it's like he didn't really, he killed himself as a person, but he saved his idea, his ideology. And this is a theological point also, because how can a suicide be saved? But San Bonaventura, Saint Bonaventure, I think you say in English, considered that as a possibility, that somebody can be saved if he or she killed himself for an important reason. And Dante takes Cato as a symbol of freedom, and here he becomes actually the guardian of this land, of this reign of Purgatorio, which is very, very interesting. And it doesn't care about the wife anymore. No? When Virgil says, hey, I come from the limbo where your wife Martha is, and Martha was with me when I was alive, now I am here.
Did Cato get his reputation primarily from Dante? I was reading the other day that in 1720 in English newspapers in London, letters were published by two Englishmen called Cato's Letters, and they later were put out in the form of a book, and they were about freedom. And copies of Cato's letters were found in the possession of our founding fathers and in the United States.
Interesting.
But was Dante really the source of Cato's?
No.
Cato had another.
They believed that before Dante. But of course, after Dante, this became more important, maybe. But before Dante, for sure.
I'm confused about the time.
Yeah, what time is it?
30 years they go around if 1 year, and 60 or 2 years.
Yeah.
Why? I thought,
30 times the time they have been
yes,
excommunicated.
I
If
thought-
you have been excommunicated 1 month, you only go for 30 months around.
yeah. I thought time was very, very long.
Was long?
Yes,
No. It's nothing.
all the people in Purgatory live there about.
But the statues was there for I don't know how many centuries.
Yes,
So 500 centuries, something like that. 500 years, and then
yes.
so for Purgatorio it's nothing. Plus, consider one other thing, that before you actually arrive to Purgatorio,
Yes.
sometimes you have to wait in Rome at the
Ostia.
river in Ostia, at the river Tevere, not Tevere, that Tiber, that the angel comes and takes you. For instance, Casella is late. Casella, the scene is late. He didn't die and go
I see.
right away. So it depends actually on the soul, on what he or she did. They have to learn. This is a learning process also. And there are rules, and for eternity it's not 30 years. So like,
This is not a question so much about this. How old were you when you first started reading Dante?
well, I started to read Dante when I was in the high school, like everybody else in Italy.
15, 14, 16?
Primo liceo,
60.
16.
16.
Yeah. But didn't think that we read you know, well, I mean, we liked it, but only Inferno, then Purgatorio and Paradiso.
And now?
Up to Paradise, we were lost when we were in Paradise. Now, after, especially after Harvard, after the La Terza, and Fido, I like more and more Purgatorio and Paradise. I've been studying a lot of history, philosophy, and from the Middle Ages with Alessandro Ghisalberti, a professor from La Cattolica from Milan. They met an excellent person, an excellent professor. So I like more and more Paradise also. But of course, hell, it's hell. Yeah, but it's
That's really good
fascinating.
stuff, huh?
I can tell you a very interesting story. When I first went to Albania, because I come from a very small community which is called Arbresh, Italian Albania. When I went to Albania, it was 1991, the first time. So I go to the library, and I was looking for Dante, for a translation. And they say, yeah, we have Dante, of course we have Dante. Let me take a look at it. This is Dante, only hell, only Inferno. I said, but there's also Purgatorio and Paradiso, where is it? No, it doesn't exist, only hell. So the only thing that translated was hell, because Enver Hoxha, the political dictator, communist, no, he abolished all the religious things in Albania. All the churches were turned into something else, into gyms, discos. The priests were put it in prison. So only hell existed, but not something that give any hope to people to be saved. It's a funny story.
Could you tell us just a little bit about your Italian-Albanian author that you did your doctorate on? I asked because there are many Albanians in the city of Boston.
I know. It's the third population.
Yes, it is. And nobody knows anything about their culture, you know. No, we Americans don't even know that they exist.
Well, the author is called Derada. He was born in Calabria, Macchia Albanese, the town where my mother comes from, in 1814, and he died in 1903. It's very important because this Derada is considered like the Dante of the Albanian literature. 150 years ago, not a long time ago, and 100 years ago he died, Centenario della Morte. So what he did is this: he invented the first alphabet made of Latin and Greek letters. He wrote the first Albanian poems with an Italian translation, of course, because he lived in Italy and he published in Naples. So who could read Albanian? Not even his friends, just a few people could read Albanian. And then he wrote the first Albanian periodical called L'Albanese d'Italia. He was the first one also that thought about Albania as a nation, because Albania didn't exist. For 5 centuries, the Ottoman Empire cancelled everything, so Albania didn't exist as a state, as an entity, as a culture, nothing. And he was the first one to thought about that, and actually he published in a book edited by the Italian government in 1892 for the 400 years of the discovery of America by Cristoforo Colombo. He published over there a poem and something where you actually read a section. There is a section for each nations of the world. Everybody, America, China, Japan, everybody sent something to the Gubernatis, was called the coordinator. And there is a section dedicated to Albania. Albania will be free only in 1908, so long time later. There are 30, 40 years ago, before he thought about telling people that there is a nation, there was a nation, and it will be a nation called Albania there. So it was considered also a vat, a poet, which also is important for land of Albania. Then what else? He wrote tragedies, he wrote philosophical works in Italian. It's very important, he had a very important correspondence with Tommaseo. I'm actually writing my second book on this correspondence. De Gubernatis, then he was friend with Fogazzaro, with Manzoni, but we lost the traces. He was a very important figure, although he lived in a small town. After he studied in Naples, he went back to Calabria. He was very important because really was speaking about Albanian and the Albanian culture when Albania didn't exist. So today is considered like the Dante of Albania. If you go to Albania, there are days like Dante. They study him at school. They have statues, they have streets, they have prizes, everything dedicated to Girolamo Berada.